Hey guys, I am really impressed with our progress as we're moving along through a React tutorial. However, the tutorial is always going to take us only so far. Now, the key is to apply the knowledge that we're learning and start creating the project. And I would like to welcome you to our first project. Now, the first project is going to be very similar to the tutorial and the mini projects what we have been working on, where we're going to create a person list where the person is going to have the image, is going to name and the job, and also one of the people is going to have the children prop, which is going to render some info about the person. So enough of me yapping, and let's start working on this project. So first things first, let's grab our setup files. Now we're obviously going to be creating a brand new Create React app. However, I did provide the setup files, and in the setup files, you're going to find the app CSS, because as you can see, we will going to be using the CSS. And not only in this project, but in the later projects. And I do understand that some of you are not interested in working with a CSS. So basically, you're only interested in working with a React. Now, what you can do is I'm going to show you how you can copy and paste all the properties and the values. So I'm only going to do the CSS at the end. So if you don't think that it's necessary for you to watch the CSS part, you can just have all the CSS and just follow along only with a React. Now, first things first, since we have the setup files, I also have in the desktop the tutorial. Now, what I would want is for each and every project, we're going to create a different Create React app. Now, you can create it anywhere you would like, but I'm going to be creating them in the desktop, and later on, I'm going to be moving it to my documents. So first things first, and I think I said first things first already 3 times, so third thing third, I guess. Let's just open up the terminal, and I don't think I'm going to zoom in because I think that we have done it already quite a few times, where now we would need to, or you know what, let's just zoom in. So let's do CD. So we would want to change the directory. And again, if you want to go right off the bat and go to your documents, and as you can see, as I was working and as I was creating the projects, I obviously had a folder over here. But since I just want you to see better everything, how it works, I would like to place right now this project on my desktop. So I'm just going to move in the desktop. Now, again, if you would like to change the directory to, let's say, your documents, you already know how to do that. So we're going to have a CD desktop. So now we're going to be in desktop. And as you can see, I have setup files and I have the tutorial. So now let's create a new Create React app. So only thing we need to do is write Create React app. And let's call this Friends and Friends List or Friends app. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call mine a Friends List. And sure enough, again, as you can see, the great developers in the Facebook have created the Create React app that is getting all the packages and installing everything for us. And the moment we're going to be done with an install, I'm going to return and we're going to start creating this application. And the moment all the packages have been installed, again, we would need to open this up in our code editor. So in my case, I'm just going to write code dot. Again, this is going to open up in Visual Studio Code. And then I would want to open up a new tab just so the developer server is going to open up in a new tab and we can still keep this. And this way we can have this side by side. And then let's go back to a Visual Studio Code. Let me just clean this up a little bit. And what we would want is, there was actually a little bit of a mistake because what happened was I didn't move into directory. So I apologize for this. Let me go back and I need to change the directory because I obviously opened up the Visual Studio Code on my desktop. So let me do the CD. Then we're going to call this friends list. And now if we're gonna be in a friends list, now we can write code. So now we're going to be opening up the actual folder that we want in our code editor. And next we have our integrated terminal. So I'm going to open up the integrated terminal, and we're just going to write npm start, which is going to open up our dev server again on the localhost 3000. So this way, as we're working, we can see everything that's happening in our project. And I'm going to be switching back and forth just to show you the finished project and what exactly is that we are doing. So let me just put them side by side, because for the dev server, it's look like it's going to take a little bit of time. And now let's go back and we can just close this terminal. And again, if you don't have Visual Studio Code, you would need to drag and drop and then open up the npm start in your terminal. So let me close this. And sure enough, now we have the app. Now we're still going to delete few things, but we're not going to be as drastic as when we were starting with a tutorial, because now we have the knowledge of what we need and what we want, and now we can just skip over them. Now we're still going to be doing all our work in a source, and obviously I'm not going to cover anymore what is in the folder structure, because we already did that before. However, let's go over what is actually right now in the index.js. So let's go to index.js. But in this case, we're not going to be deleting anything. And as you can see, later on, we're going to learn about the imports. But notice how we're importing the app. So the app component that is sitting right here in the app.js file. And this is doing exactly the same thing that we did as we are rendering the app in the root. So we're using the React DOM render, and then we're selecting the ID root to render it. And like I said, we don't need to repeat anymore the React DOM, because we just need to render it in the index.js. And in this case, we're not going to delete anything. We're going to leave the index.css and index.js just exactly like it is, because we already know how to work with a index.js. And here in the app.js, this is where we're going to be doing all our work. And as you can see right now, it is actually getting the React component. And this is going to be the second component that we're working on. So this would be a class component where we're using the JavaScript class. However, obviously, we haven't covered this before, because we have just worked with a functional component. So first things first, I would want to get rid of the logo. I really don't need the logo. So let's delete the logo. However, we're still going to keep the app CSS, because this is where we're going to be importing all our styles. And since we're not using the logo, we can just go ahead and just delete the logo here also. So both of the logos are gone. Now we're going to be complaining because it is expecting here image with a source of logo. So what we can do is we can just delete here the class app extends, and you can delete everything till the export of default. And again, we will going to cover the imports and exports very, very soon. But I think it's more beneficial if we're going to finish everything that we started in the tutorial. And the moment we're done with this project, then we're going to look at how we can start importing, how we can use different files for different components, and so on and so forth. And what we would want right now is first to create the app component that is going to accept the component of ours of person list. So altogether, we're going to have three components. One is going to be the app. The second one is going to be the person list. And then we'll have a person. So as you can see, this is going to be the nested tree of React components. So first things first, we know that we have the class component, correct? I'm sorry, the functional component of app. So let's write over here a function, but instead we can just write a arrow function, since we can use the ES6. So let's write that this is going to be the app, and we need to name the same as our export. And let's just say that there's not going to be any props here, and we're only going to accept the person list component that we still need to create. So for now, let's just write that there is going to be a JSX, and in this JSX, we're going to write person list, and we're just going to close it out this person list. Now, once we have the app ready to go, we would need to create this person list, correct? Otherwise, this is not going to make any sense. So let's write another component. So const, and in this case, we're going to write person list. Now, what we're looking for is, again, a component. Now, in this case, again, the component, we're not going to pass any kind of props to a person list. We're going to pass a props to a person component, which is going to be our third component. So let's write again that there's going to be a JSX involved, of course, because we need to render something. And in this case, we're just going to say that we're going to be rendering out a person. But you know what, just for the sake of clarity, let me write that this is going to be explicit return, and we're going to write return. And then within return, this is what we're going to be looking for a person. So let's write over here that this would be a person. And now let me create a person. So we did a little bit backwards. We had an app where we are rendering the person list. Then we created the person list. And now we're going to create a person. Now, once we're going to learn about the classes, we're obviously going to do a normal way where we're going to have the app, and then we're going to be rendering everything from the app. Now, we're still doing the correct rendering. It's just we're going a little bit backwards. Normally, we should create a person first, and then person list, and then person list would be in app. So let's say const, and let's call this a person. And again, we're doing nothing magic. We're just creating our components. And again, just for the sake of clarity, let's write that this is going to be explicit return. So let's write return, and we would be returning a what? Well, now we need to really decide. So for now, just so it is a little bit easier for us, let's just write that this is going to be, I don't know, a div. And let's write I am person component. Now let me save this, and now let's see what we're going to have. So we have our app, we have the person list, and then we're also going to have the person. Now maybe just because we had it before, let me move this person below the person list, and maybe on the very top we're just going to have the actual app. So we're going to have the app. In the app there's going to be person list, and in the person list there's going to be the person. So the most of the work we're going to be doing in the person, however, we're still going to do quite a bit of work in the person list. So we have our nested components, and if we really want to, we can just check it out in the React developer tools. So let's go back, and sure enough, what we're going to have is, as you can see, we're going to have our app. Now within the app, we're going to have person list, and last but not least, we're going to have our person. So this is the nested tree that we're going to have with a React components. Now, this is all nice and great, but now we would need to decide what first we're going to be showing in the person. So since, like I said, we're going to be doing most of our work in the person, we would first need to see what we have. So we have the image, and we have the name, and this would be an occupation. And one of them is going to have over here the children. And before we do anything with a React, for those of you, again, who are not interested in any kind of CSS and just are bored and just want to skip this, what we can do is we can just either copy and paste this file and drag it to a friends list. So this would be probably the fastest. Now notice, grab in the friends list this app CSS, and we're just going to move it to trash. So we're just going to delete it. So for a second, the app is going to break because it's looking for the app CSS and we don't have it. So if we're going to go back to the app CSS in the setup files, and again, we can just copy this file. So let's say copy app CSS, and let's go back to the source and copy and paste it in a friends list. And now everything is going to be working. However, now we have our own styles. So this is the style sheet that I created. Now what I'm going to do at the end, I'm just going to delete this, and we're going to go line by line, and I'm going to tell you what I created, and you're going to be creating with me. Now those are just for the people who actually are interested in this. So now once we have the app CSS ready to go, the only thing that people who are not interested in CSS, you need to apply the classes exactly as I do. So that way you can skip actually working with a CSS. Now, in our case, since we have app.js and app.css open, I can just close the sidebar. And now the only thing left to worry about is about our app.js. Now, like I said, first we would need some type of what? Well, we would need some type of image. Now I'm getting my images usually for people. I'm just using this random user.me. And if you're just gonna go to their webpage and go to documentation, if you scroll down, they provide this URL where basically we can get a random thumbnails. And as you can see with an API, we have the address, then portraits, then thumbnails. And here this would be a men. So we can choose either men or women. And then the only thing left to do is change the number. So I really like this because then I can pass it as a parameter and I don't need to worry about getting the image or different name. The only thing is I change that number and I'm getting a different image. So first, before the return, so before the JSX in the person, let's write that this is going to be our URL. And let's just copy and paste this URL. Now, in our case, we can keep it either 65, or if you want, we can change these values. So let's start, maybe let's place over here. Let's say that this is going to be 22. And now within the div, now let's change some things around. So this is not just going to be a simple div. Now we're going to do some little bit more complicated return. Now, before we write anything within a JSX, let's add a class, since we want to add the CSS as we go along. And the class name is going to be the person. So we're going to write over here the person. Now, once we have the person, notice already right away we got some CSS. Now, also for a person, we would want name, we would want a image, and we would want the occupation, correct? So let's write that this is going to be the person. So we're still working within a person, and we just need to create a little bit more complicated return. So we're going to have a div, and now the first is our interest in the image. So let me create first the image, and then for the source, what we're going to do is we're going to use the URL. Now we know that we can use the JSX. We can access with a curly braces. So I'm going to write over here, this is going to be my URL for the image. Next is going to be the occupation. Now for the occupation and the name, I would want to create a separate div. So again, let's try to understand that this is going to be my parent div. So this is going to be my parent person div. And then we're going to have image. And then right after the image, there's going to be another div with a name. So let's write over here name. And let's say that there's going to be an occupation. So again, this is going to be heading 4. And we're going to call this job. So let's just call this job. So once we save it, sure enough, we have a person. So the person has the name and the job. And this is the image that we're getting. So this would be the most simplest component that we know of. And obviously we have all the styles because there is a style sheet that is attached to our app.js. Now what we're interested is rendering 3 different people, because as you can see we have 3 different people and each of them have name and then the job, and also obviously each of them have a different image. So we already know how we can do this, where we go to our person list. And again, we're not going to touch app at all anymore. The app is just being rendered and that's it. It's the only thing we care about. And let's again do the same thing where we had a return, and let's just apply these parentheses here, because this is just going to make our life a little bit easier. And within the person list, we would want to create an array again, because the setup would be exactly the same how we worked before. So I'm going to write const, and let's call this, I don't know, this time we're going to call this people. And this is where we're going to place our people. So I'm going to say people. This will going to be an array. Now within the array, there's going to be an object. Now the first thing for an object is going to be the image. So where are we getting our image? Now, like I said, the only thing what we are worried about is the fact of what? Of just getting this different number. since all of them are going to have this same URL, just the number is going to be different. So what we can do? Well, we can pass this number as a prop. So here we're going to say that there's going to be an image, and for the image, let's write again, this is going to be 22, but for the other ones, we're going to change the values. Now, next one is going to be the job, and we're just going to call this guy a developer. So we're going to say over here, developer, and also we probably needed the name. So we're going to write name, and the name is going to be John. So John, and job is going to be developer. So these are going to be our values. So in this case, we have image, name, and job. So since this is going to be our first object, again, in our array, let me copy and paste it. And we still need to follow normal, obviously, JavaScript syntax. So let me place these commas in between. Now, like I said, we would want different images. So for the second person, we're going to say image is going to be 34. And then what? Then we're going to have a 56. And name is going to be here Bob. Then let's say this is going to be Peter. And he's not going to be developer. He's going to be designer. And let's just give this one an artist. So we're going to have a job of artist. So once we save it, notice that I have my array of people. Now the key here is that I'm still returning just one person. So obviously what we would want is return 3 people, correct? Since now we have an array. So let's go back and let's say that this is not going to be just one person that we're returning. Instead, let's just create a div. Or you know what, let's do section. So let's write, again, we're going to write it in parentheses and we're going to write section. Now over here, I need a opening tag and then we're going to write section. Now within a section, like we did before, we're just going to grab 3 of these persons. So 3-person component. So 1, 2, and 3. And like before, we know that we can access these objects if we're going to have the props. So we need to pass the prop, and then we need to pick which index from people array we're going to be adding to. So we're going to say person. So this is the prop that we're going to be passing. And we're going to be passing, I don't know, people, and let's just say 1. So index 1 from the array. And now we can just copy and paste this. And for the other 2, we're just going to change the values. If this is a 0 index for the array. Now, obviously, if we want different people, this is going to be 1. And this is going to be over here, 2. So we have 3 different people. However, since you notice, we are not passing the props yet. We just set up a URL, basically the image, name, and a job. And since we're rendering 3 components, that's why the same component is being rendered with a same information. Now our job right now is grab the props and actually add the props to the values that we have in the component. So we know we have the props. So we're going to go back and we're going to say props. So we're accessing the props object. Then next we would need to do the structuring. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to go back and we're going to say const and what we're looking for. Well, we're looking from the props, we're looking for the image, then we're looking for name, job, and last but not least, we're going to say children, because one of them is going to have children. Now, we're not going to get them right now. We're not going to display them right now. We're going to do everything else before, but one of them will going to have children, and we're going to set this equal to a props. Now, how we can get a different image? Now, notice we're passing different values. And you know what? Let me zoom out a little bit. So maybe that way you can see the whole picture better. So we have our array of people. Now, each of them has 22. That's basically a different value. Now, what I'm interested is in this URL. Since this URL is getting a different value, but for now it's just getting 22. So since we can still work like with the normal JavaScript, we can add a template string over here, and we can just access the variable. Now, what is the variable? Well, this is the image that is changing from each and every time we're passing a different value in our person prop. So let's say that this is going to be a $sign, and we would just want to access the image. So now we're making sure that each and every time the image is going to be different. Next, next we're interested in the name. Again, the name is going to be different because the values are being passed different. And obviously in our array, the values are different. So let's write over here that we're looking for the name. And last but not least, we're looking for a job. So we're going to be looking for a job. Now, once we save it, everything goes blank. So we cannot see anything. So there has to be some kind of mistake. And in fact, there is a mistake because we're passing the person prop, not just a props object. So what we would need is have a props. Then we're going to write person because we're getting that from the person prop. And then also we would need to move this children, since obviously the children are exactly in the props. So let me change this. Let's say const, and children are going to be directly from the props, but the image, name, and the job is going to be from the person. So once we're going to save it right now, then everything is going to be working, where we're going to have our people, and each of them is going to have a different value and different image, and also a different job. Now, before we move on to a CSS, we already know that we can add some kind of info using children, or not just some kind of info. We know that we can use children to display whatever content is in between the component. So we can choose which component we would want. So let's say in this case, I chose the second one. So let's go to a second component. And again, let's create a closing tag. And then let's just render, I don't know, some kind of lorem text. So let's say lorem and I don't know, 15 letters, something like this. And again, nothing is going to be showing right now because we need to go and access the children and specifically tell React where we would want to render this. So again, it's really up to you. So let's say right after the job, we're just going to say that we're going to render the children. And this is only going to show for the second one because obviously this is only place where we are placing the children. So this would be the HTML and React part. Now let's switch gears and let's actually talk about the app CSS, what we're doing and how we're styling. So this is the moment for people who do not like CSS. You can just move on to the next lecture. Now, first things first, let me just delete everything and then we're going to set our styles from the beginning. So as you can see, this is how it would look like if we wouldn't apply any kind of style. Now, what we would want is to go back and let's see where we're getting the comment. And now that we know that, let's go to app CSS. Now, in the app CSS, first things first, I would want to select all the items and I would want to give them margin 0 and padding 0. So I would want to get rid of the padding and margin that is default in every browser. Now also I would want to set up a box sizing to a border box. Now the reason why we're setting up the box sizing of the border box is because as we're going to be applying the paddings, we would want that padding to be applied to an element, and so the element wouldn't grow in size. Because if you don't have the box sizing of border box, as you're applying the padding to some kind of element, it's in fact gets bigger, and this is not something that we would want. And the only class that we'll have is the person class. So this is the only thing we're going to be styling. Now we're going to be using the nesting, where we're going to use the class and then we're going to tell what we would want to do with an image or heading 4. However, that's not the best way how to style it, but just because these are just basic React projects, we're going to use the nesting. So since we have the person class, we would want to select that person class. And first, let's just give it a background. And let's say that there's going to be hashtag and EEE. So 6 E's over here. So once we have that, next we would want the width. And we're just going to say width is going to be 17 REMs. Then padding, we can just add some padding all around, which would be 1 REM. And we would want some margin in between. So let's write margin, and margin is going to be 2 REMs and auto. So now what we're doing is we're placing them in the center, since the margin top and bottom should be 2 REMs, and left and right, this is going to be a auto. So this is how we can place them in the center. After that, we would want a little bit transition, because as you notice, as I'm hovering over the person, we're getting a little bit of a box shadow. Notice as I'm hovering, I'm getting this box shadow. However, if we would want that change to happen over time, we would need to add a transition. Now for the transition, we're just going to say transition all, and then 0.3 seconds and linear. So basically what transition should be affected, we're saying all the transitions should be affected, and how long this should take. This should take 0.3 seconds, and the way that transition should take place should be linear. After that, we're going to have a border radius, and we're going to set this to 0.3 REMs. So there's going to be some border radius right now. Now also we would want to text align center. So text align and center, and sure enough, right now our text is in the center. And then, like I said, we're going to do a nesting where we're going to have a person, and we're going to use image. Now, one of the reasons why I did CSS with a nesting, because I wanted us to have a clean GSX as much as possible. So you notice we only have one class name with a class of person, and everything else is just plain HTML. And this way, again, while we're going through the project, our code is staying cleaner. So let's go back, and let's say that we're looking for a person image, and we're going to do a border radius of 0.3 REMs. Again, now we're tackling the image. Notice now the images gets affected. Then border radius of 50%, and you know what this should mean right away, 50%. I don't know why I didn't do that. It should be 50%. And after the border radius, we're going to do border, and let's just write 1 REMs and solid deal. Now why we're using the REM values, because they are responsive. So we would be using the pixels, those are absolute values. However, REMs are changing depending how the user has set up their HTML root element. So this is the reason why we're using REM values. After that, we would want to work with a person, heading 4. So now we'd want to style the heading 4s. And within heading 4, we're just going to do text, capitalize, or text transform, sorry, is going to be capitalized. Margin is going to be 0.5 REMs and 0. So top bottom is going to be 0.5 REMs, and 0 margin is going to be left and right. And then we're going to have a letter spacing. So letter spacing is going to be 0.5 REMs, like this. So now we have some letter spacing. And then let's do again color, and let's just say color is going to be our favorite deal. Now, after that, we would want to work with a person hover. So as we're hovering, we would want to add this box shadow effect that we had before. So let's go back, and let's say that there's going to be a person and hover. So as we're hovering over the person class that we had before, here we're going to say box shadow, and we're going to have 2 pixels, which would be the X direction, then 5 pixels would be Y direction, 10 pixels is going to be blur, and the color is going to be RGBA, and we're going to go for the black one with 0.3 opacity. So 000, comma 0.3. And as you can see, since we have the transition, this change, the box shadow, is going to happen over time. And just like that, we have our first React project done, and this is going to be our first React application.